I was with the 232nd Infantry Regiment of the 42nd Rainbow Division. Christmas, we were already in Europe at the tail end of the Battle of the Bulge when we arrived. I was in the infantry, and that's a foot soldier, and we walked everywhere we went. We didn't get to ride much, if at all, and so we were actually on the front line, that's the best way to describe it. And in many cases, we entered the towns and cities and crossed the hills and the valleys first. So we saw a considerable amount of combat during that short period of time. On April the 29th, 1945, is the day that we entered Dachau. And it was a cool, damp day. It seemed as always when we went down a gentle, rather pretty slope, grassy fields on both sides of the road. And that was the first time that we saw the camp itself. Quite high walls, stucco-like stone. And we didn't know what it was. We perhaps thought it was an army camp. And the thing that I remember most about reaching the camp was the odor that we had never experienced before. And it was so bad that some of us thought maybe it was gas being used by the Germans in an effort to save the war. When we actually got to the camp, there was a train, boxcars, and some 6 or 8 boxcars were outside 2 large gates that entered into the camp. I went around the cars to go on the other side, and there, for the first time, I saw the bodies of people that had been machine gunned, and they had fallen out and into heaps or piles. That was the first time I saw anything like that. It was something that I didn't understand. I didn't know what it was or who these people were, why they looked so emaciated, why they were killed. We more or less walked over the bodies to get through the gate and into the compound itself. And there we saw the rest of the cars and the continuation of bodies piled outside the cars. And that was our entrance into the camp. We got to the gate that entered into the compound, and there, for the first time, I saw the sea of faces of people that appeared to be dead, but yet they were still living. But I immediately realized that something was not right. These people that were so emaciated, so their heads, eyes were sunken back into their head. Some of them were not able to stand alone. They were holding on to the fence, or some others would hold them up so they could stand. It's something that I didn't quite understand. There was no real cheering, yelling and screaming of jubilation for being liberated at that time, because I don't think they knew what they were seeing either. And it took a little while for them to really realize that they were being liberated. We would enter the camp some days following that, and when we did, they would fall down on their knees and hold you around your legs and kiss your boots, kiss your leg, and just they were all elated then and happy that we had liberated them. But it took them about a day to realize what was happening. And then the very next morning, which would be the 30th of April, the Red Cross was there, the medical aid was there, the food was there, and the trucks came to pick up the bodies and all that sort of thing. And I didn't know how many people were there, but since that time I have read that there were about 33,000 in the camp at that time. And as I understand it, those boxcars that I was telling you about, that was the quickest way they could get rid of them, was to kill them in the boxcar by opening the door and just machine gun them. Now the gas chamber and the incinerator were a little outside, actually was outside the camp, which would be the northeast corner of the camp. And when we did finally get to it, the bodies were piled in there all the way to the ceiling practically and waiting to be burned. And so in other words, I think what happened, we got there sooner than they thought we were going to get there. And so they just killed those so we couldn't liberate them. The most pitiful situation that I saw was some that were in so-called infirmary or hospital, which was nothing but wooden slats on a bump in straw, and there were people there dead lying in the straw, and some were so weak they couldn't raise their head up when you went in. It was a sad sight to see that. While we were there, not having any specific duties to perform, we would go into the compound nearly every day, in with the prisoners. Sometimes we would find a person that could speak English, and then they would begin to tell us where they were from and why they were there, and many of them were political prisoners. They were thrown in for no particular reason other than they just didn't belong to the Nazi Party, or they were some trumped up deal that they had were an enemy of the state or something to that effect.
Was anyone able to communicate any experiences of what life had been like in the camps?
No, we didn't really get into very much of that.
So it wasn't until many years after the war that you actually knew what those prisoners had suffered.
Right, it was, and since that time, and I still do, I read as much as I can and try to find out what happened prior to it before we got there. I know what happened the day we got there, but I didn't understand what had happened before, and so I try still, even today, to find out more and more about what happened.
Did you see any concentration camp personnel? All the Germans had left?
No, they had not left. Most of them had. Some of them were still there, and what they did in an effort to escape, they put on some prison uniforms themselves. But we had no problem finding them because they were fleshy. They did not look like the others, and the prisoners themselves would run them down for us, and they'd find them, and usually the time we got to them, they'd beaten them to death. They would be dead time we got to them.
So
with stones, with sticks, with boards, anything they had. And of course, when we got there, they had the encouragement that we were there and they could do whatever they wanted to, and so they killed. I didn't see a single German come out. I tried to talk about what I had seen to people, and at that time, those people really didn't want to hear it. And I can understand. They'd already been through a war. They'd already heard about death and death and death. But they didn't want to hear anymore. And so I didn't talk about it anymore. Then as I went along, it began to get emotional, and I quit talking about it altogether, didn't like to talk about it, and refused to talk about it. I would have really liked to have just let it pass it off, forget about it. But then I got the curiosity of what happened before I got there. I wanted to find out more about that. And I didn't really understand how one group of people could do that to another group of people. Then at the same time, my real point is that this happened, and it can happen again. I've heard of people saying that, well, this really didn't happen, that it's a hoax and all that sort of thing. I can't say what happened before I got there, but it was not a hoax, what I saw. Hopefully, everybody should know this, to appreciate everybody and respect everybody. It doesn't make any difference what ethnic group they are, what color they are. You must appreciate and respect people. Then in turn, they will appreciate you and respect you. And then we can get along a lot better.